Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just did a little recruiting update. We had a little update show for the first part, did some spring updates and then some recruiting updates. And now we're going to get into some best games of 2024. We have done this before. We're up to week 7 and week 8, and this is when it gets really, really interesting. I'll be totally honest. We have tons of games to talk about. And first, let's start with, excuse me, apologies. There we are. I got confused on the bottom ticker here. But we do have a ton of really, really good games in week 7 and week 8. But let's jump right in. Let's start with week 7. And the best one in week 7. Ohio State heads to Eugene to take on Oregon. This one's going to be intense. I'll be totally honest. This one is as big of a game in the Big Ten as you could imagine this upcoming year. I think both these teams right now I would put at 1 and 2 in the Big Ten rankings right now. And I think they are if you look at the Vegas odds for winning that conference. So this one will decide a lot. Oregon getting them to come to Eugene is absolutely huge. And one of the big questions I have for this game, I know Ohio State's defense can match Oregon's offense. I feel pretty confident in that. I think they have a ton of remarkably talented guys, obviously a ton of guys returning, and then Caleb Downs on the back end coming in from Alabama. I think they have so many guys that can counter this Oregon offense. The question is, can Oregon do the same? They have a ton of transfers. We'll talk about their defense here in the next segment, but I think the question is, can they do the same to Ohio State? It's going to be a remarkable run game from Ohio State this year, and I'll be really interested to see if they can pull that off. But this game, I am just remarkably excited for. And then we have Ole Miss at LSU, another game that you might not be the top tier SEC game that we talk about in the next week that you might see down there, but Ole Miss at LSU is a huge game. I think both these teams have the ability to make noise in the SEC. I think they're going to be jockeying for position, and if they really want to make noise and possibly even make an SEC title game, they got to win this game. Plain and simple. This is a game that either of these teams really, really need. LSU getting it at home is obviously a huge advantage. And then talking about the quarterback matchup, this is one of the better ones that we will see in the SEC, and it shows just how good these quarterback matchups are going to be all season. Garrett Nussmeier and Jackson Dart going at it. I'm very, very excited for Garrett Nussmeier getting his first starting reps. He is someone that I think is really going to explode this year, to be totally honest. And then Jackson Dart kind of exploded last year, but a lot of people are expecting a lot of things from him. So this is a game that definitely will define the SEC in a lot of ways. I think whichever team wins this game could be set up to make a late season run at the SEC, because obviously coming into this game there could be two undefeated teams, there could be two teams that are struggling to meet expectations, but as of right now I look at that game as one that could really define the SEC this upcoming season. And then another one that will always define whatever conference they are in is Texas versus Oklahoma in Dallas. Obviously, the Cotton Bowl, the Red River rivalry, and you gotta love it. It's the best rivalry in the game, if you ask me. Quinn Ewers is 1-1 in those games. We expect him to be off to the NFL after the season, so he's gonna want to win the last one, that's for sure. Oklahoma was able to get one from Texas last year when everything was rolling for Texas, really jumped on him. Brent Venables got a huge win in his second year. Brent Venables is 1-1 in these games as well. So a ton riding on this game. I think Texas is going to come in very prepared, very angry, but we'll see what happens. Jackson Arnold will be obviously well into his starting role at this point, and I cannot wait to see him step into that stadium for the first time and be under those bright lights, because it could get interesting very quickly. It is not like a normal environment. It is not like a normal game. So him starting in that game for the first time will be something to watch for sure. And for some reason, if he were to not start in this game, hopefully there are no injuries or anything, but if you were to go down and they need a backup, it could be Casey Thompson, which is very interesting because he started in this game a couple of years ago. I believe Steve Sarkisian's first year at the helm at Texas, he started for Texas at quarterback. So it would be very interesting to see a guy start for Texas and then later for OU at quarterback. Obviously, the reality in the new transfer portal world that we live in, but Still tons of SEC games in this week to get to, and Florida at Tennessee is at the top of the list. There are tons riding on this game. Tennessee obviously has big time aspirations this year with Nico Iamaleava at the helm, and I think Tennessee has not had very good luck against the Gators. They have really struggled in this series, won the last one in Knoxville, so have to be feeling good about that, and will likely have the more talented and probably the better record when we come into this game, but a lot can happen in these rivalry games, and we will see a lot of different things happen in this game, but the guy I'm watching, obviously, and the guy a lot of people will be watching throughout the year is Nico Iamaleava, the dark horse Heisman candidate, and I think if he is going to be that guy, if he's going to be in the Heisman conversation for real, I think this is a game he could absolutely dominate. We look at Jaden Daniels last year and what he was able to do against Florida. It was remarkable. It was one of the best single games that I have ever seen from a quarterback or from anyone on the field for that matter. So this is a game where if we get to this point in the season and Iamaleava is the talk of the town, he is the guy that everyone is pointing to, this is a game where he could absolutely light him up, and I would be very excited to see all that. But obviously, tons to happen before we get to that point. And then a really interesting Big 12 matchup, Kansas State at Colorado, Kansas State, in my opinion, is the top team in the Big 12. I think they have everything in place. Avery Johnson is a remarkable quarterback coming back for this year after Will Howard moved on to Ohio State. And Shedeur Sanders versus Avery Johnson is a really fun quarterback matchup. We might not be looking at that as necessarily the top of the list, especially in this week with so many great ones that we just talked about. But this is going to be a lot of dynamic plays, a lot of plays with their legs, making things happen off schedule. I cannot wait for this game, and I think if Colorado can make something happen throughout this year, this could be a huge game in Week 7 instead of a game where Kansas State should likely win and continue rolling to a Big 12 title. It could be Colorado, the one rolling to a Big 12 title, or it could be two big-time players in that conference going at it. So cannot wait for that game. Cannot wait for this week. I feel like Week 7 is, you get into the meat of the season. You get into all the different talking points and tons of different stuff happening around the game. And you start to realize who's who, right? Who are the contenders? Who are the pretenders? Who are the teams that are kind of standing out? But another little note here for Week 7, the ACC has a big-time week, and some of these games might not seem like big-time games, but they could really define the ACC in 2024. Syracuse at NC State is a huge one. Grayson McCall needs to get a win there, but Syracuse has a lot of momentum right now under Fran Brown, the new head coach. Then you have Clemson at Wake Forest. We've seen Clemson get tripped up on the road a little bit over the last couple of seasons. This would be a spot where that could possibly happen. Georgia Tech at North Carolina. Georgia Tech I've talked about a little bit as a dark horse candidate. North Carolina is the exact same. I think a lot of people are writing them off because Drake May is walking away, but still plenty of talent up there in Chapel Hill, and we'll be very interested to see what happens there. And then Louisville at Virginia, another game where Louisville should likely win, but at the end of the day, going on the road in conference play is never easy, so we will definitely be watching those games closely. But let's get to Week 8, because somehow I think Week 8 might be a little bit better than Week 7. It's very, very close, honestly. It might go to Week 7. I can't decide, honestly, now that I'm looking at it. But this is a remarkably good week, and it starts on a Friday for us. Florida State at Duke on a Friday night. This is another game in the ACC like we just talked about with Clemson and with Louisville. When you go on the road, it can get very, very sketchy, and especially in conference play. And Duke is kind of one of those wild card teams. They just hired Manny Diaz as their head coach. He's kind of implementing a new defense down there. Got Malik Murphy, the talented quarterback out of Texas, to come over in the transfer portal. So tons can happen in this game. And if Florida State's not careful, the Blue Devils could absolutely get him on a Friday night. But Malik Murphy is the guy I'm definitely watching throughout the season for Duke, but especially in these types of games. These are the games that are going to catch NFL guys' eyes, catch the eyes of scouts and coaches and GMs and all the people that you want to be catching the eyes of, but they will catch him for good or for bad. So he needs to be able to, at the very least, prove that he can, run the offense effectively, do the things that he can do, and show off that remarkable arm talent, because it is something to behold. But very excited for that game. I think Florida State is going to be walking to that game probably with a lot of confidence, maybe even undefeated, and then Duke could ruin the entire thing on a Friday night. But we will definitely be watching that one closely. And then you have Alabama at Tennessee, a classic rivalry, one of the ones that I like the most. You get the cigar smoke over the stadium at the end of the game, one of the best shots of the year every single time. And Tennessee got Bama last time they were in Knoxville. Hendon Hooker had a remarkable game, and they feel like they have the quarterback to pull it off again in Nico Iamaleava this year. So very excited to see this game. I think there is a ton going into this game. And one of the more underrated but kind of exciting matchups that we will see throughout this game is probably Caden Proctor making his way back to Alabama. It seems he will likely be at the left tackle position, and he will see a lot of James Pierce Jr. He is someone that I believe to be the best edge rusher in the entire country. He is someone that is a total game changer for Tennessee, and if he can blow up Caden Proctor a couple of times in that game, things get very interesting very quickly. So very excited for that game. I think Tennessee has the ability to definitely pull off the upset here, especially depending on how things shake out through the first 7 weeks for these teams. And then let's get into a little ACC matchup here. Miami at Louisville. This game is huge. It's kind of like the LSU Ole Miss game that we just talked about, but in the ACC. These are two teams that really, really want to make noise. Louisville obviously coming off a season where they made tons of noise. Miami still building under Mario Cristobal, but if you want to make noise in the ACC, if you want to make that title game, both these teams are going to need to win this game, and obviously both teams cannot win this game. So one team's going to come away with it. Louisville getting this one at home is absolutely huge because it gives them the chance to continue the run they started last year and get a big-time win over Cam Ward and the Hurricanes. But this one's going to be a lot of fun. I think it will really define the ACC. I really like Florida State and Clemson, but these are the two teams right under them that could make some big-time noise. And if you're going to do it, you got to win that game. So it'll be very interesting to watch that one. And then South Carolina at Oklahoma. This one's really interesting because there's a ton of talking points. Shane Beamer going against his old team was the OC at Oklahoma for some time, and then Brent Venables using a little bit of that Clemson hate against South Carolina. I'm sure he still has some of that pent up, so he will have no trouble getting hyped up for this game. And Jackson Arnold needs to roll in this one. If he's the starter, if he's the guy going into this game, this is one that he needs to show his ability, show his upside, and not necessarily, dice up the South Carolina defense by any means, but really have a good day and show his ability and show his, where he can go. He doesn't necessarily need to be perfect next year, nor do I think he will be, but this is a game where he should be able to kind of flex his muscles and show what he's really about. So very excited for this one. And then let's get to the main event. Well, actually, before we get to that, let's talk about the SEC this week in Week 8 because there are tons of big-time games. We already talked about Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, Oklahoma. We'll get to a big game here in a second, but we have Auburn at Missouri. We have Kentucky at Florida, LSU at Arkansas, and Texas A&M at Mississippi State. So tons of games that are very important for these teams, whether it's a team going on the road in a game they absolutely win, or like Missouri hosting a team that is very dangerous in Auburn, and you got to win that one. But let's get to the game that is going to define this week and maybe just define this entire college football season. Georgia at Texas. This is the game, not of the week, but of the year, in my opinion. I think this is going to be a game that everyone is looking forward to. This is the game between the team that I grew up being a fan of in Texas and the school I went to in Georgia. So it'll be an interesting evening for me, that's for sure. But I think this game is just going to be remarkable. If both of these teams walk in undefeated, which is going to be really tough. Georgia has Bama, I believe, before this. They have Clemson before this. Texas has Michigan and Oklahoma before this. So it's going to be tough to get there undefeated. But if they do, and both these teams have the capability to do that, Georgia will be 1, Texas will be 2. I feel very, very confident about that. You will get Carson Beck against Quinn Ewers. You will get Steve Sarkisian against Kirby Smart. You will get everything you could possibly want out of this game. This is going to be a remarkable atmosphere, 2 remarkable offenses, some real talent on defense on both sides of the ball. This one's going to be insane. Pretty much any way you cut it, any way we get there, I think this game is going to be awesome. I think if we do get there with 2 6-0 teams, we could be having a lot of fun, that's for sure. But we will have to wait a little bit for that one, but very, very excited. And I think this is going to be the game that we look back on in this season and say that was the game of the season, whether it's playoff or otherwise. But that will do it for this edition of the best games in 2024. Tons of remarkable games in week 7 and week 8. The real meat of the season when we get into the big time games, figure out where everyone stands for the season. But we're going to take our final break here. When we come back, we have another Spotlight Wednesday for you, and we're going to talk about the Oregon Ducks. A lot riding on this year for Dan Lanning and the Ducks, so we will talk about them and what to expect from them when we get back from this break.